Hi, this is Jeff Altman, and welcome to webtalkradio.net. Last time I spoke with John Sampson about easy and effective networking and the mistakes people, myself included, make way too often. This time I'm continuing our discussion of networking with Terrence Seamon, who's an organizational development, job search, and career coach who's written several books, including To Your Success, which is a motivational guide for anyone in transition. Now, the reason I brought him on is because he's co-founded and co-moderates the St. Matthias Employment Ministry in Somerset, New Jersey. And he's also written a white paper called Grouping for Support about how to start your own networking group. And that's what the theme of this show is going to be, is about starting your own group. Terrence, welcome to Job Search Radio.
Hey, Jeff, it's great to be here. It's actually an honor. I've been following you on social media for quite some time, and it's really great to be on your show and to be talking with you.
Thank you, and it's nice to meet you as well, yet again. Terrence, I'm curious. You know, there are a lot of groups out there. Why did you decide to start one for yourself?
Well, you may laugh, but it was because the pastor of my church, which is a church in central New Jersey called St. Matthias, the pastor, Father Doug is his name, said to one of the deacons, Deacon John and me, he said, "You two guys are out of work. Why don't you start an employment ministry?" This was back in 2007 when both Deacon John and I had both been downsized by our employers. And it was before the Great Recession, so Father Doug was definitely ahead of his time, you might say, and he often is. He's kind of a visionary leader. And so Deacon John and I got together and we brainstormed and did some benchmarking against other similar faith-based organizations in New Jersey and beyond. And we put together our concept, you might say, and then we took it out to the congregation at large to see if anybody wanted to join us. And we were very gratified that a bunch of people put their hands up and said they'd like to join us. And so we formed a team.
And how many people would you say were part of that team when you started off?
Initially, we probably had anywhere from 25 to 30 people that wanted to help us brainstorm. So after the initial, idea session, filling up chart page after chart page of ideas of all the things we could be to all the people that we could be serving, finally we came down to a core group of about 10, and that core group still exists for the most part today, 7 years later. And we're still going strong, still helping people just like you. We have a very similar mission to yours, Jeff, trying to give people good, useful information that will help them accelerate their job search.
That's great. When I was talking about the idea of this show with my wife this weekend, she asked me, why would someone want to start a group? It seems like a lot of work.
Well, especially in New Jersey, because in New Jersey, we have had a ton of groups. I mean, you had John Sampson on last time. He started his group in 1991, as you pointed out in that discussion with him. I'm still amazed by that. And there are many others in New Jersey that have started similar groups. So, yeah, I think it's a valid question. Why would you do it when you have so many groups around? But what we found is that even with a lot of groups that exist, there still is a need for another group because there are people that, for whatever reason can't get to John's group or, so-and-so's group that might be, just down the turnpike or down the parkway a ways. They really need something that's closer to home.
And what I also thought when I was speaking with her is that not every group accommodates what I as a participant might really want. Like,
Exactly.
They may have a formula to them, but I would like to have personal catering done for me. So the idea of starting my own group that caters to my needs and my career, not just simply when I'm out of work or looking for work, but one that could follow me for many years, would be a great vehicle for being prepared for not just this job search, but for the next one and the one after that as well.
Well, I love what you just said, Jeff. Could you write that down? Because that's beautiful. I mean, that really is what it's all about for today's job hunter who might be sitting there listening to this podcast thinking, gee, should I be starting a group in my neighborhood? The answer, I think, and I think you're saying, is yes, you should. It will help you, the job hunter, and you'll be helping others, which is very much what you and John Sampson were talking about recently, about how job hunters need to turn the whole equation around and ask themselves, how can I help others? And then by helping others, they help themselves.
We're on the same page here, Terrence, because frankly, I believe that the more you connect with people and make them like you, trust you, respect you, they start to listen to you and they hear you. They want to help you as well, not out of any sort of obligation, but because they want to. It's really that simple.
Yeah, exactly. It's a type of synergy. You know, corporations want to have synergy because they're looking for new products, new services, new ways of, delivering to their customers. Job hunters also want synergies. And the synergies really come from what I call grouping. And grouping, sounds like a funny word, but it's basically getting together with others in groups.
Real simple. And I suspect there are different types of groups that people can form. Some dealing with the crisis of, oh my God, I lost my job, into other kinds of formats. What kind of groups have you seen out there or contributed to their forming?
There are many different kinds of groups out there. Some groups are very skills oriented and they're great. You join such groups and then they immediately put you into skills workshops on resume writing, cover letter writing, interview prep, how to network, formulating your elevator speech, writing your business card, et cetera, and so on. So some groups are very heavily skills oriented, and they're wonderful, and I totally support them, and I've experienced the benefit of them. Some groups are more job lead oriented, where you and the other members of the group are expected to contribute leads to the others in the group, both between the meetings and at the meetings. And those are very helpful kinds of groups also because you get a lot of leads that way. And one particular group I was a member of some years ago had the concept of a touched lead. I don't know if you've heard that before, Jeff.
I'm not familiar with that term. Could you explain it to me, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. In fact, it might be sort of unique to the moderator of that group. His concept was that, it wasn't just enough to come to the meeting with, 10 leads on a piece of paper that you're going to give to everybody, but you had to have touched the lead, meaning you spoke to somebody in that organization and you learned something about the lead that you're going to share. So it's more than just scraping leads off of Indeed.com or SimplyHired.com or CareerBuilder, which is sort of the easy way out. You have to have actually contacted someone, and you have to know something about the lead. Isn't that an interesting concept?
Yeah, it is, and a lot more valuable for people who are attending a meeting than, of course, just pulling something off a job board.
Yeah. Another type of group is modeled after the classical mastermind group. You're familiar with that idea, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
The mastermind group?
Yeah, I was a part of a mastermind for a number of years. But just in case someone isn't, how does a mastermind group work?
Well, my understanding of it, and correct me if you've got a different approach to it, Jeff, is that a mastermind group is the type of group where you and a few other people intentionally come together to help one another formulate a business idea. It might be going back into the corporate world, if that's where you came from when you were downsized, or it might be, formulating a new business that you yourself want to launch at some point. Or maybe it's some other new idea that you're trying to hatch, and the other members of the group are really your incubator, you might say, for that idea, giving you their input, challenging your thinking, stretching you perhaps in ways that maybe you wouldn't on your own. And so the mastermind group is really enlarging your mind through the power of the group of minds that comes together. Does that match to your idea of a mastermind group?
The group I was a part of was a little bit different. We were all people in different professions, kind of like the business networking group. And yes, we provided support, but not based upon necessarily great knowledge we had of, in my case, there was no one there who really understood the recruiting profession, except from the standpoint of having used the service. So yes, they could talk with me in general terms, but nothing that would be really specific that would be useful. Where I could see what you're describing working very well is for someone who's a career changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even is feeling a little bit of an entrepreneurial drive and is thinking, wow, is this maybe the time in my career when I should, hang out a shingle and branch off on my own instead of, being part of somebody else's company?
Interesting usage. So when you first started coming together, there's always problems. What sort of problems did you face as you were starting off this group, just so people can anticipate some of the issues that might arise in the initial formulation phases?
No, it's a great question, Jeff, and every individual, listening to this conversation and going ahead and starting their group, I salute them and I encourage them, but here's what to expect. You're going to get together with one or two or three or four other people. Hopefully you'll form a little nucleus of like-minded individuals that all are motivated to do this. But you're all going to have different ideas. And that's challenge number one. How do let's say the four of you or the five of you somehow reach consensus on one idea? Because you can't, go off in five different directions all at once. And so your skill, let's say you're the leader, your skills at bringing those four or five people together into a unified vision are really, really important. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change later on. You certainly can. And in fact, the group that we started at my church has evolved quite a bit over the 7 years that we've existed. And that evolution is good. It's necessary. It's in response to changes in our marketplace that we've seen. But that initial, say, couple of months when the group is being born, you might say, is very, very critical so that nucleus of people comes to a common vision of what it is that they want to do initially. And that would be my key word, initially. This is what you're going to do for starters. Start with a bunch of ideas, but then you need to close in on one thing you're going to start with. And then, of course, you can change it later on.
It's interesting that, I remember earlier in our conversation you started talking about 25 or 30 people who were interested in supporting this and brainstorming, but it sounds like ultimately you try to distill it down to an executive committee, a board of directors who have their own ideas as well, taking input from the larger group and try to create a vision or a purpose for the group.
Exactly.
And hashing that out for that initial meeting or group of meetings to see if there's actually an interest in what's being proposed.
Exactly. It really is. Think of a funnel. People who are in sales that are listening to this, if I say the word funnel, they'll immediately relate, I would think. You put a whole bunch of ideas into the top of the funnel, but then there is a narrowing down, and finally there is a product that pops out the other end that's very focused. And that's where, at some point, that nucleus of people who are creating this group, they'll come out with what I would call a mission statement or a statement of purpose, what our group is going to be. Our group is going to be a support group for people in transition here in central New Jersey, and we're going to meet, every other Saturday morning at such and such a location. In my case, it was my church. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide moral support, interesting speakers, and we're going to provide one-on-one coaching on different job skills with a focus on resume writing. And that little role play, that was exactly what my group finally decided. So that, in a nutshell, is what we decided to do. And that was after walls full of chart paper of many wonderful ideas that we eventually had to winnow down to a decision ultimately of what we're going to do when we finally opened our doors and said, okay, here we are, we're in business.
And you spoke about, of course, meeting at your church, but there are other places that people can meet as well, whether it's other religious institutions, or I know in a lot of communities the local library will open up meeting room space for free. As long as you're not charging, they'll make the library space available for free for groups to meet on a schedule, of course. But space doesn't really have to be an issue for you.
That's right. It doesn't have to be. It could be a church, some other place of worship. It could be a YMCA, a YWCA. It could be a library. Here in New Jersey, we have actually a statewide program run by the State Library Association. I forget the name of the program offhand, but the essence of the program is that the libraries, want to be a resource to job seekers. And they have, career sections where there's career materials. They want to host meetings of groups like we're discussing. And a very entrepreneurial fellow up in North Jersey who you might want to talk to someday, John Fugazi, has started a group called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. What a great name, right? Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And the Neighbors Helping Neighbors phenomenon meets at libraries, and they have spread all across North Jersey, the counties of North Jersey, and they have spread beyond New Jersey into New York, Massachusetts, and I've kind of lost track of where else they've gone, but it's been incredibly successful, and part of their formula is partnering with libraries.
Wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I think you said his name is John Fugazi.
Fugazi, yeah. He's a super guy. He's also running a program through Montclair State College where he's bringing in people like me to speak to rising seniors who are getting ready to graduate and go out into the world of work, to give them a realistic preview of what they're heading into.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
so,
amazing.
Do groups charge for admission, or does it tend to be a free service?
Generally, the groups that I'm aware of tend to be free, but sometimes there are nominal fees to cover, let's say, coffee, bagels, maybe a room rental if they're actually renting space, say, on a college campus. I'm thinking of one group in particular I'm aware of down in Princeton, New Jersey, that rents a room from the university when they meet, and so everybody kicks in $10 when they walk in the door. And that can be tough for job hunters. Having been a job hunter myself, yes, $10 can be a pretty big dent in your wallet at times. But it's all above board. It covers the cost of the room, the coffee, the bagels, and so it's very transparent.
So looking at it from the selfish standpoint, as the job hunter who's starting a group, and I'm going to put you in the spot on the spot here. What were you hoping to get out of starting this group, and were you able to deliver this for yourself? Yeah.
Our initial motivation was we wanted to help. Now, keep in mind, we started the group before the Great Recession hit. When the Great Recession hit in 2008, we sort of looked at one another, Deacon John, me, and our core group. We looked at one another and said, holy cow, look at what just happened. Thank goodness we're here. And not that we, were the big, panacea to the whole thing, but we suddenly saw a huge surge in people coming to our meetings. And, it was amazing that we were there at the time when we were most needed. And people came in, they were eating up everything we had to say about resumes and networking and, the power of your attitude, the importance of developing your sales skills. We had all these topics that suddenly surfaced that we were doing one after another. Stress management, you name it. We had topic after topic, from that point on for the next several years as the recession, the repercussions of the recession sort of rippled out through our entire society. So So yeah, our initial motivation was to be helpful, and boy, were we helpful. We got a lot of great feedback from people, not only when they landed, which we're always happy about, but even when people just, came back to us either face-to-face or sent us a note and said how helpful it was that we were there and that we were so positive, we were so supportive, we had such, a friendly, warm, welcoming kind of an environment that we created, and that people just wanted to thank us for that.
And folks, I want you to hear this message loud and clear. If you don't think there's another recession that's going to happen at some point in the future, you're mistaken. Right now, things may be good for you. You may have a job, and everything may be going along wonderfully. But you want to have things in place so that should something happen, should you need to make a job change, should you be laid off from your job, the mechanics are all in place. The relationships are in place so that this way you're not starting cold, scrambling at a time where you're probably at your worst, from fear and anxiety and financial concerns and a bunch of other emotions that will surface at those times. And just have everything ready for yourself so that this way you can just continue doing the things that you're doing, but with one extra twist, and that is, instead of being out there trying to find all these folks, they're there in front of you and very willing to help because you've been helping them. Exactly.
Jeff, I hear what you're saying about the future. I hope you're wrong, but I have a feeling you're right. Just looking
back at what we've
experienced, it's probably going to come again at some point.
Over 100 years, if you look at it, it's not like we've had a 10-year period where we haven't had a recession. We always have something, or worse. So, again, this isn't a political statement. I'm not being critical of anything. It's just statistical probability suggests something will happen. A lot better to be prepared than not prepared. So I want to just continue because we don't have a lot of time, and you're doing great with a lot of good information. So I just don't want to miss any points here. How much time did you find you were putting into this over the course of a week during the early formation stages?
Well, early on, there's a lot of time that you're going to find yourself investing in it, but you're going to want to do it because you want it to be successful. You want it to help people, and so there is a lot of time invested. We never stopped to really tally it up because we were so motivated, so engaged, so passionate about what we were creating. I'll tell you, however, fast forward, several years into our group's existence, and we found that the attendance at our meetings started to fall off, and we eventually interpreted that as a good sign that people didn't need us as much anymore, and so we eventually made the decision to go virtual. Now we are a virtual group. We have a Yahoo group presence where we have a big membership, and we pump out job leads, interesting articles, news about upcoming job fairs and events like this podcast. And, we just pump out information to our folks, and we let them know what groups are out there that are meeting that have interesting speakers coming up. And so our group now is available at any time, but we don't have regular meetings anymore. So we've evolved. And now, though we don't meet, we're still helping people because people still pop up fairly frequently, and they'll say to either Deacon John or me, "Hey, are you people still around?" The answer is yes. Can you help me or my son or my nephew or my brother-in-law with his resume? Yes. And then we go ahead and we help people. So we've evolved. Now we're virtual, but we're still there with the same mission to try to help job hunters as best we can.
That's fabulous. When you were meeting, how did you find speakers to come in and talk to the group?
Initially, the speakers came from our core group, so I might do a talk one time, Deacon John might do a talk. Some of our members of our core group, we had a retired HR director, he gave talks. We have a recruiter named Sam Valou, who I mentioned to you. He gives talks on the mind of the recruiter and how the recruiter operates. We had a retired sales director who gave talks on selling skills. So we had a lot of skills in our group, but then eventually we reached out to other groups in New Jersey that were bringing in outside speakers, and we asked them, who are good speakers that you would recommend, that you think we ought to have? And so we then started to bring in speakers from outside, bring in fresh thinking, new ideas, new blood, and it was great. And we brought in, Abby Kohut, who you may know, who's kind of a popular speaker on the job search circuit. We brought in Donna Colson, who you may know, and a bunch of others. And we found that our audience really liked, when we would sometimes bring in some unusual, the most unusual one might be Kenny Moore. He calls himself Kenny the Monk Moore. He's an ex-priest who became an HR guy and then retired and is now a speaker and stand-up comedian. I kid you not, Jeff. He's very funny, but he's also very wise and has a lot of interesting things to say about making transitions in your life.
Kenny the Monk Moore. Take my job,
monk.
Please. I can see it now. There's a lot more to cover, but we're starting to get tight on time. Is there something in particular that I've missed in the way of a question that you think would be useful to our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
Someone might be listening to this thinking, oh, wow, boy, these guys, they're really into group stuff. And the person might be saying to themselves, I'm not the group kind of person, And the reason I'm throwing this in here at the end is that's where I was years ago, Jeff. And I had a conversion experience. I kid you not. This sounds like I'm making this up, but I had a conversion. And the conversion was the first time I got downsized in the early 1990s. And I found myself, at the recommendation of a friend, going and joining a group down in Princeton. And that group led to another group, John Sampson's group. That one led to another group. And I think, at some point I was probably going to 6 groups or more. And I suddenly realized that my previous bias about groups, which we could go into another time, was completely ridiculous. And that the power of groups is amazing. And so if somebody's sitting there thinking, wow, I don't know, this group stuff doesn't sound like it's for me, well, maybe we need to talk more.
And I just want to check with you. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Although there's benefit to having, let's say, an all HR group or an all accounting group.
Oh, yeah.
The group that you run at St. Matthias is not unique to one specific profession. Information is shared by people from all sorts of fields and crossroads in life. It's just useful because people have similar experiences even though they're in different professions.
That is correct. And there are excellent groups out there that are very much, defined by an occupational affinity. So you have groups for finance people, groups for IT people, groups for engineers, groups for, pharma people. So, yeah, there are tons of groups like that out there, and those groups are excellent, by the way, because you're hobnobbing and rubbing elbows with people from your own industry, and so there's a lot of, really interesting networking that goes on in those groups, too, that we could talk about perhaps more in a future conversation.
I love that. And I would just suggest to our listeners that if you're starting a group, that's probably the ideal format to work with. IT people helping IT people. You can even subset that more tightly to IT people in a particular area, so like business analysts, program managers, who can provide support to one another based upon common knowledge and experiences. I don't think you need to go that far, but you may choose as a way of advancing your career to be around people who have similar experiences and learning from them.
Exactly. Yep.
So, Terrence, thank you. You've been terrific. And I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to get a copy of that white paper that you've done. What's its name, and how can they get a copy of it from you?
The name of the white paper is called Grouping for Job Support in Today's Economy. Janice Lee Javrud, a colleague of mine, and I wrote it back in 2009. And when Margaret Riley Dickel of the Riley Guide found it, it went round the world when she started to advertise. I think that's how you found it initially also, Jeff. And people can get that from me simply by sending me an email to terrence.seamon@gmail.com.
And Terrence, please spell your last name, because there are multiple ways to spell Seamon.
And it often is spelled all kinds of different ways. My last name is spelled Seamon.
So that's Terrence.Seamon I'm sorry, I was jotting something down.
Not a problem, at gmail.com. And I'm also very easy to find on LinkedIn and even other social media, but I'll just stop at LinkedIn. People can find me there, and I would welcome them linking up to me if they've heard this conversation on your radio program.
Terrific. And folks, I'll have that email address up on webtalkradio.net when this podcast is posted there. Folks, we're going to be back next time with more job search advice. Now, I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. If you're interested in job search coaching from me, you can reach out to me in a variety of ways. One is I'm a live person job search and career coaching expert with liveperson.com. So you can reach me through that if you have a couple of questions. And if you'd like more broad coaching from me through the course of a job search, you can find out more about my coaching programs at VIPpersonalsearch.com. Again, I work one-on-one in a personal way with you in an effort to help you get back to work more quickly, because to me, job hunting doesn't have to be so hard or difficult or painful or take so long. It's just, for most people, you don't realize that the skills needed to find a job are different than the skills needed to do a job. And that's where this podcast and my e-zine, which, by the way, you can get a complimentary subscription to my e-zine, which is called No BS Job Search Advice. I publish it weekly with advice for job hunters good anywhere in the world. It's a $499 value I give away for free. And you can get a complimentary subscription to my website, which is jeffaltman.com. And while there, go exploring. There's a lot of great content there.